The city was loud, as it always was. Cars honked, people shouted, and footsteps echoed off the tall buildings. Among the chaos, a young girl walked slowly down the streets. Her clothes were torn and dirty. Her shoes were old, and they barely held together. Her hair, once soft and bright, had become tangled and dusty. She carried a small bag with a few things she owned, but most of her life fit into her memory and her heart. She had learned to survive day by day, never thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow was never promised. She moved carefully, keeping her head down so people wouldn't notice her. Most people didn't see her anyway, or if they did, they looked away quickly. Some scowled or whispered to each other about her, calling her names that cut, even when she pretended not to hear. She had grown used to it. The world seemed too busy to care about someone like her. And yet, inside her, there was something that refused to give up. A tiny spark of hope, a quiet voice that whispered that she was more than her circumstances. Every day was a struggle. She had no home to go to, no warm bed or soft blanket. Nights were the hardest. The city streets could be cruel, cold, and empty. Sometimes she slept under bridges, sometimes on benches or in corners that seemed safer. Hunger was a constant companion, gnawing at her stomach and at her thoughts. She would watch people eating, laughing, sharing meals with friends and family, and her heart would ache. She wanted food, yes, but more than that, she wanted to feel human again, to be seen. And acknowledged she had learned to be careful. She never begged loudly or demanded attention. She asked quietly, sometimes for food, sometimes for water, sometimes just for a smile. But kindness was rare. Most people ignored her or hurried past. A few gave her coins or small pieces of bread, but that was not enough to fill the emptiness inside. She longed for something more, something that could remind her that life still held beauty. Music had always been her escape. Even when she had nothing else, she had music. She didn't have a piano or a violin. She didn't have instruments or lessons. But she had rhythm in her fingers, melodies in her mind, and a voice that could carry emotion far beyond her small frame. She would hum quietly as she walked, tap rhythms on park benches, and imagine notes floating through the air. It was the one thing that made her feel alive, even when the world was harsh and unkind. That morning, the streets were colder than usual. A light rain had begun, and the wind cut through her thin jacket. She pulled the collar tight and tried to keep moving, hoping to find something to eat before hunger made her dizzy. She passed shop windows, filled with warm lights and delicious smells. People sat inside, sipping coffee or enjoying pastries. Her stomach growled, reminding her of her desperate need. She paused for a moment, staring through the glass at a family laughing together. She imagined being part of a scene like that, and the longing in her chest grew stronger. She quickly looked away before anyone could see her eyes glisten. By noon, she found herself near a large restaurant. The doors were heavy, polished, and inviting. She could smell the aroma of cooked food drifting outside, teasing her senses. She hesitated at first. She knew what people like her usually faced when entering places like this. They refused service, shooed her away, or worse, mocked her. But hunger pushed her forward. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The inside of the restaurant was bright and warm. Waiters moved quickly, carrying trays of food. Guests chatted and laughed, their conversations filling the room with comfort and normalcy she had longed to feel. She moved quietly toward the counter, hoping to ask for a small meal or something to drink. But the moment she approached, the waiter looked down at her, his face twisting into a frown. "We don't serve people like you here," he said sharply. Her heart sank, but she didn't argue. She nodded, holding back tears, and slowly walked toward a corner of the room, hoping maybe someone would notice her and offer help. No one did. People continued their conversations, eating and laughing, completely unaware of the girl in the corner. She felt invisible, but the hunger in her stomach made her presence painfully real to her Dot as she looked around the restaurant. She noticed something at the far end, a grand piano. It was polished, shining under the lights, a beautiful instrument that seemed almost magical. Her fingers twitched instinctively, drawn to it as if it held the answer to her longing. She had never played in front of anyone before, not in a place like this. But there was something in her heart urging her forward. She moved slowly toward the piano, every step filled with nervous energy. She was aware of the eyes starting to notice her, whispers spreading through the room. Some people looked amused, others annoyed, but most were simply curious. She hesitated at first, her hands hovering over the keys. She could feel the smooth surface beneath her fingers, even before touching it. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rhythm in her mind guide her. Then, almost without thinking, she pressed a key. A soft note rang out, delicate and pure. She smiled faintly, feeling a flicker of warmth and hope. Slowly, she began to play, each note carrying her feelings, her hunger, her pain, her longing, her hidden joy. She played softly at first, unsure of how her music would be received. The restaurant grew quieter. Conversation slowed as people noticed the change in the air. Her music was different, something they had never heard before. It was raw, emotional, and filled with life. People began to watch her, their expressions changing from confusion to wonder. Even the waiter who had refused her a meal stopped, his eyes wide as he listened. There was something about her playing that was impossible to ignore. Dot. As she continued, the music grew stronger. She didn't just play notes. She told her story through them. She played the moments of being ignored, the cold nights, the hunger, and the pain. She played the moments of hope and the small joys she clung to. The room seemed to change with her music, the noise fading away, leaving only the sound of her heart in every note. Some guests pulled out their phones to record, unable to resist capturing the incredible moment. Whispers turned into quiet admiration. People leaned forward in their seats, listening intently, their expressions softening. The girl's hands moved across the keys with grace, precision, and a deep emotional connection. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, not just as a homeless girl, but as a musician, as someone with a story worth hearing. For the first time in a long time, she felt recognized. She felt her worth beyond the clothes she wore, or the hunger in her stomach. She felt that spark of hope in her chest grow brighter, pushing away the fear and despair that had been her companions for so long. She played until her fingers ached and her heart swelled with emotion. When she finally stopped, the room was silent for a moment. Everyone caught in the magic she had created. The waiter, still stunned, approached her cautiously. He looked at her with a new understanding, a mix of guilt and awe. The guests continued to murmur among themselves, praising her talent quietly. She looked up at them, a shy smile on her face. For the first time in a long while, she felt seen, and it felt like a small miracle. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if anyone would offer her help, or if they would simply return to their meals. But for that moment, she felt alive, proud, and strong. The music had given her a voice when the world had been silent. And for the first time in her life, she realized that maybe, just maybe, things could change. Maybe there was a place for her in a world that had seemed so cold and unkind. She slowly stood up, her heart still racing from the performance. She looked around at the people who had once ignored her, now staring with amazement. She felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Fear of being pushed away again. Hope that someone might finally see her worth. She picked up her small bag and stepped back, letting the music linger in the air like a promise. The city outside was still loud and harsh, but inside the restaurant, something had shifted. Something had changed in her, too. She had discovered that even in the darkest times, a spark could shine through, and that spark could not be ignored. It was just the beginning, and though she did not know what lay ahead, she knew one thing for sure. She had music, and with it, she could face the world in a way she never had before. The girl stepped back from the piano, her fingers still tingling from the music she had just played. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and hope filling her chest. The people in the restaurant were staring, some with admiration, some with disbelief, and a few with skepticism. She could feel their eyes on her, studying every move, judging her not by her music, but by her appearance. Her clothes were still torn, her shoes scuffed, and her hair tangled. But for the first time in a long while, she felt more than the sum of her hardships. She felt alive. The waiter who had refused her earlier seemed conflicted. His face softened slightly, a hint of shame in his eyes. He looked at her, then at the piano, as if realizing for the first time that the girl before him was not just another homeless person, but someone with a gift that demanded respect. He cleared his throat nervously. "That was remarkable," he said, his voice low, almost hesitant. She nodded politely, unsure what to say. Words felt inadequate after what she had just expressed to Music. As she moved toward the door, she hesitated. Something deep inside urged her to stay, to keep playing, to let the music tell more of her story. She looked back at the piano, her hand brushing over the polished surface. The room was quiet now. The hum of conversations paused, replaced by a collective curiosity. People were watching her, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged somewhere, even if just for a moment. She decided to sit back at the piano. Slowly, carefully, she placed her fingers on the keys. This time, she played with more confidence, letting the rhythm flow from her heart. The music was soft at first, tender and cautious, like someone testing the waters. Then it grew stronger, more expressive, as she poured every ounce of feeling into it. Each note was a story, each chord a memory, and each melody a hope that someone, anyone, would understand her. Patrons of the restaurant began to lean forward, listening intently. The whispers that had started earlier faded into silence. Some pulled out their phones, recording the unexpected performance. The girl noticed, but she did not stop. The music was no longer just for herself. It was for everyone who had ignored, judged, or doubted her. It was for the world that had refused her a meal, but had not yet refused her voice. The waiter stood frozen near the counter, watching in awe. His earlier dismissal was gone, replaced by a quiet respect. He was not the only one affected. Guests who had laughed and chatted without a thought now sat captivated. The melody moved through the room, soft and strong at the same time. It had a weight, a presence that demanded attention. She was no longer invisible. Every note announced her existence, her struggle, and her courage. The girl closed her eyes and let herself feel the music. Memories of the streets, of cold nights and empty stomachs, flowed into her fingers. She played her fears, her loneliness, and her moments of quiet hope. She played her dreams of a life that could be more than survival. She played her gratitude for the small things, for the occasional kindness, and for the spark of resilience that had kept her going. Every note carried a piece of her soul into the room, transforming the space around her. A few guests whispered among themselves, realizing the extraordinary talent before them. Some wondered how someone who looked so broken could create something so beautiful. The girl did not stop for them. She did not play for recognition or reward. She played because she had to, because it was the only way she could express the fullness of her being. Music was her language, her bridge to a world that had seemed close to her. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours to her. The music filled the restaurant, weaving through conversations, tables, and hearts. The piano, once just a piece of furniture, became a voice for her experiences. People began to forget where she had come from, focusing instead on the depth of her talent. They were no longer looking at a homeless girl. They were witnessing an artist. They were hearing a story of resilience, courage, and hope told without a single word. The manager of the restaurant had been watching from a distance. He had seen the girl enter and had dismissed her, thinking she would leave empty-handed, unnoticed. Now he moved closer, drawn by the music. He could feel the change in the atmosphere, the energy shifting from routine dining to something extraordinary. He watched as the girl's hands danced across the keys, her expression focused and serene. There was no fear, no hesitation, only pure expression. He realized that the world outside had judged her wrongly. Here, inside his restaurant, she was commanding attention and respect effortlessly. He felt a twinge of guilt for having ignored her earlier. He wondered how many times in life he had overlooked people who deserved acknowledgement, simply because they did not fit into his expectations. The music was opening his eyes, and perhaps the eyes of everyone in the room. Meanwhile, the girl continued to play, her mind and heart fully immersed in the performance. She felt a strange connection with every person present. Their reactions, their attention, even their silent judgment, all fueled her music. She had never played for an audience before. Never had people listen with such focus. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. She understood that she held the power to move people, to touch them deeply, without saying a single word. A woman sitting near the piano leaned over to whisper to her friend, "Can you believe she is homeless?" She said softly. Her friend shook her head, eyes wide. "No, she must have trained somewhere," she replied. "She's incredible." The girl overheard the exchange, but she did not let it distract her. She had learned long ago to ignore whispers about her appearance. Her music was her shield, her voice, and her truth. As the music swelled, a few patrons started to clap gently, almost hesitant at first, afraid to break the spell. Gradually, the applause grew louder, filling the room with admiration. The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had not expected recognition. She had only wanted to play, to release the feelings she had carried for so long. The applause was a surprise, a gift she had not imagined. It reminded her that even in the darkest times, beauty could emerge, and people could see it if they were willing to look. After what felt like a lifetime in music, she finally slowed, letting the final notes linger in the air. Silence fell, heavy and profound. The room was full of people holding their breath, caught in the aftermath of her performance. Then, slowly, the clapping began again, louder this time, filled with genuine appreciation. Some people stood up, cheering softly. Others wiped tears from their eyes, moved by the unexpected display of talent and emotion. The waiter approached her once more, a plate of food in his hand this time. He hesitated, unsure if she would accept it. "Please," he said softly. "You must be hungry." The girl looked at the plate, then at him. She had been refused earlier, treated like she did not matter, and yet now he was offering kindness. She nodded slightly, a small smile on her face. She took the plate, feeling a sense of dignity that she had not felt in a long time. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. The food was warm, nourishing, and comforting. But more than that, it represented something deeper. It was a sign that the world could change, that people could recognize and honor talent and humanity. She felt a spark of hope that had been absent for so long, a feeling that perhaps life could be different from what she had known. The guests continued to watch her, some whispering excitedly, some offering smiles of encouragement. The girl realized that she had created a moment that would linger in their memories. She had turned a place that had once seemed indifferent and cold into a space of awe and inspiration. Her music had done what words could not. It had spoken directly to their heart's dot as she finished her meal. The girl looked around the restaurant one last time. The piano stood silently, waiting, as if it had shared in her journey. She ran her fingers over the keys, feeling the echoes of the music still in the room. Then, with a deep breath, she stood up, ready to step back into the streets, carrying with her the knowledge that she had made a difference, however small. Just by being herself, she walked out of the restaurant slowly, rain still falling lightly, but she felt lighter than before. Something had shifted inside her. The city outside remained noisy and harsh, but she had discovered that even in a world that often refused her, she had the power to create beauty, to command attention, and to inspire. And for the first time in a long time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, her life could hold more than survival. She had a voice, a gift, and the courage to let it shine. The girl left the restaurant that afternoon, but the echoes of her music followed her like a gentle shadow. People inside had whispered and laughed and cried, but they would not forget what they had heard. She walked through the streets, feeling the damp cold on her face and the hard pavement beneath her feet. Her stomach was full for the first time in days, but her heart was full too, with a strange mixture of hope and fear. She had shared something of herself, something powerful, and she did not know what would come next. As she moved through the city, she noticed small changes. People looked at her differently. Some who would normally avert their eyes now nodded or smiled. She could not explain why, but she felt lighter. Music had always been her secret companion, and now it was beginning to give her a place in the world she had never known. Days passed, and she found herself returning to the streets. But the memory of the piano stayed with her. She walked past the restaurant, peeking inside from time to time, hoping perhaps to see the piano again, or someone who remembered her performance. But life on the streets continued, with its cold nights and harsh mornings. Hunger still gnawed at her, and she still slept in corners and under bridges. Yet there was a spark inside her that refused to die. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she found herself near a small square where street performers often gathered. People played instruments, sang, or danced for coins tossed in their direction. She watched them quietly, remembering the sensation of performing for people who had stopped, even briefly, to notice her. Her fingers itched to play, but she had no instrument with her. She tapped her fingers on a bench, imagining the keys beneath them, the notes filling the air. She could almost hear the piano again, almost feel the music pouring from her heart. A young man walking by noticed her and paused. "You seem like you have music in you," he said softly, curious but kind. She looked at him, hesitant to speak, unsure if he would mock her or dismiss her as everyone else had. But his tone was different. It carried genuine interest, not pity. She nodded slightly, and for the first time, someone saw the music inside her without needing to hear it. The next day, she returned to the restaurant, drawn by the memory of the piano. She did not know what she would say or do, only that she needed to play again. When she entered, the staff looked at her with surprise, and a few guests still remembered her. Some whispered among themselves, recalling the music that had enchanted them. She walked to the piano with slow, steady steps, her heart pounding. The polished keys gleamed in the light. Waiting. She sat down and closed her eyes, letting her hands hover above the keys. The room grew quiet, as if everyone knew something extraordinary was about to happen. She began to play softly at first, the notes tentative but beautiful. Slowly, the music grew in confidence, filling the room with sound that was both tender and powerful. It carried with it the weight of her life, the struggles, the hunger, the cold nights, and the hope that had kept her going. People stopped their conversations, leaning in to listen. The whispers turned into silent admiration, and the staff paused their work to watch. Even those who had never paid attention to her before now realized that she was more than just a homeless girl. She was a musician, a storyteller, a force that could move hearts. The music flowed effortlessly, as if it had always existed in the air, and her hands had merely found it. Her performance became bolder, more expressive. She played with passion, letting every emotion flow through her fingers. She played the pain of rejection, the hunger and cold, the loneliness and fear. But she also played the moments of beauty she had witnessed on the streets, the small acts of kindness, the quiet moments of hope, the sparks of joy that had kept her going. The music was raw and real, a mirror of her life, and the audience felt it in their bones. A man at a corner table watched with growing astonishment. He was not just a guest. He was a musician and a teacher, someone who had spent years studying the craft. He had seen many talented people, but there was something about her that was different. Her technique was impeccable, yes, but it was the emotion, the story behind each note, that made her music unforgettable. He leaned forward, fascinated, trying to take in every movement of her hands, every shift in expression. Guests began recording her, sharing whispers of admiration with each other. Some could hardly believe what they were witnessing. A girl, barely more than a teenager, homeless and alone, was commanding the attention of an entire room with nothing but a piano and her heart. It was a moment of magic in the ordinary world, a reminder that talent and beauty could appear where least expected. The music continued to grow, swelling in volume and intensity. The girl closed her eyes, letting the notes carry her away. She no longer thought about the people watching her, the hunger she had felt, or the streets she would return to. She was lost in the music, in the story she was telling with her hands, in the emotions that poured out with every chord. It was as if the piano itself understood her pain and hope and amplified it for the world to hear. The man who had been watching approached quietly after her performance, his eyes shining with admiration. "Your music is incredible," he said, his voice sincere. "You have something very rare. You should not be playing on the streets, struggling to survive. You have a gift that the world needs to see." The girl looked at him, unsure how to respond. She had heard praise before, but never from someone who truly understood music, never from someone who recognized the depth of her talent. She nodded slowly, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. Fear of being rejected again, of being taken advantage of having her life judged and dismissed. But excitement, too, the kind that made her pulse quicken and her hands tingle. For the first time, she imagined a future where her music could open doors, where her talent could lead to opportunities she had never dreamed possible. The next few days were filled with small but significant changes. People who had witnessed her performance began to talk about her, sharing her story and the videos they had recorded. The restaurant staff treated her with more respect, offering her small meals without hesitation. Strangers on the street nodded in recognition, and a few even smiled. It was not wealth or comfort that changed their behavior, but the undeniable truth of her talent and presence. She continued to play whenever she could, sometimes for coins, sometimes just for the joy of sharing music. But now there was a difference in her. She played not just for herself, but for anyone who needed to hear the story she carried within her. Her music became a bridge between her world and theirs, a reminder that even those overlooked by society could hold extraordinary gifts. Then, one afternoon, she noticed a young woman standing at the edge of the restaurant, watching intently. Unlike the others, she did not record her performance or whisper in disbelief. She simply stood, listening, her eyes fixed on the girl at the piano. After the performance, she approached with a gentle smile. "I'm a music producer," she said softly. "I've been searching for someone with a gift like yours. I think you have the potential to share your music with the world." The girl froze, her heart pounding. Opportunities like this had always seemed distant, almost impossible. Yet here it was, offered with sincerity and encouragement. The girl nodded slowly, unsure of what to say. She had learned to be cautious, to protect herself from disappointment and false promises. But something in the producer's eyes reassured her, a warmth and honesty that mirrored the feelings she had experienced through music. It was the first real offer of hope she had received in a long time, and it stirred something deep within her, a mixture of courage, excitement, and cautious optimism. That evening, she returned to the streets with a new sense of purpose. The city felt different somehow, not less harsh, but full of possibility. She knew the path ahead would not be easy, that there would be challenges and doubts, but for the first time, she believed in the potential for change. Music had given her a voice, a presence, and now, perhaps, a chance to create a life she had only imagined. As she lay under the bridge that night, the sounds of the city around her, she thought about the piano, the audience, and the producer's words. She realized that she had already begun a transformation, not just in the eyes of others, but in her own heart. She had discovered that her music could transcend fear, hunger, and loneliness. It could reach people, touch them, and remind them and herself of the beauty in resilience and hope. And as she drifted to sleep, her dreams were filled not with hunger or fear, but with the melodies she would play and the world she could reach. The next morning, the city was quieter than usual. A soft drizzle coated the streets, and the early light reflected off puddles in silver streaks. The girl walked carefully, her shoes making soft squelches with every step. Her bag, small and worn, hung across her shoulder. She had slept fitfully the night before, dreaming of pianos, music, and the strange possibilities that had begun to enter her life. She could still feel the producer's eyes, kind and encouraging, and the words spoken to her, a chance to share her music with the world. It felt like a dream, one that she was both afraid and eager to wake into. Her path led her toward the restaurant, where she had first played in front of an audience. The piano waited inside, polished and gleaming under the soft morning light. She paused for a moment at the door, hesitating. Would people still notice her? Would she still have the courage to play in front of them? She had grown used to being invisible, used to the world ignoring her. Yet the music called her, as it always did, and she could not resist its pull. She entered the restaurant cautiously, her eyes scanning the room. A few familiar faces recognized her immediately, smiling in encouragement. Others were curious, waiting to see if the girl who had played so beautifully before would perform again. She walked toward the piano, feeling the anticipation and tension growing inside her. She sat down, fingers hovering above the keys, and took a deep breath. When she pressed the first note, the sound resonated through the room, soft but deliberate. Everyone turned, leaning forward, drawn into the music that was about to unfold. The melody began slowly, tenderly, but with an intensity that could not be ignored. Each note carried emotion. Each chord told a story. People listened, spellbound, as if the piano had become a voice speaking directly from the girl's soul. She played not just with skill, but with feeling, her music expressing the struggles, the pain, the hopes, and the dreams that words could never fully capture. The room seemed to transform around her. The chatter faded, the diners became silent, and all eyes and ears focused on her. A few restaurant staff moved closer, unable to resist the power of the music. Even the manager, who had been skeptical before, found himself leaning against a wall, watching in awe. He had seen many performers, but there was something extraordinary about this girl. Her music was raw and true, untrained in the formal sense, yet it carried a depth that could move hearts. He felt a twinge of regret for having overlooked her before. How often had people missed such beauty because of appearances, because of prejudice? The girl's music grew stronger and more expressive. She played her memories of the streets, of hunger and cold, of nights spent shivering under bridges, of meals that were sometimes skipped, and the loneliness that had been her constant companion. But she also played the small sparks of hope that had kept her going, the few kind gestures from strangers, the occasional warmth of a sunny day, the quiet moments when she had felt alive despite everything. Each note carried her story, raw and unfiltered, into the hearts of everyone in the room. People began to react in small but powerful ways. Some were visibly moved, wiping tears from their eyes or holding their hands to their chests. Others whispered in amazement, sharing quiet remarks about her skill and the emotions she conveyed. A few took out their phones, recording, sharing with friends, wanting others to witness this unexpected magic. And yet, amidst the attention, she remained focused, lost in the music, letting it flow naturally from her fingers to the air around her. The music did not just entertain. It connected. It connected her to the people who had once ignored her, to the strangers who had never noticed her existence, and to herself. She had discovered a truth, that talent and courage could break barriers, that a single person could touch many hearts at once. For the first time, she felt that her life might be more than survival, that her story could matter, that she could be seen and heard for who she truly was. The producer who had approached her before had returned, quietly observing from a corner. He had been in touch with other music professionals and had arranged for a small opportunity to bring her music to a wider audience. Today's performance was not only about the restaurant, but also about demonstrating her skill, her depth, and her resilience. He watched her play, noting the fluidity of her hands, the emotional richness, and the unwavering focus she brought to each note. He understood that this girl could go far, if only given the chance. As she played, a few children sitting nearby leaned forward in fascination. They had never seen someone play like this before, especially someone who looked like her. Their eyes were wide, their faces lit with curiosity and wonder. She felt a strange warmth at seeing them so captivated. Perhaps they too would learn a lesson, that talent and beauty could exist in unexpected places, and that no one should be judged by their appearance alone. The music continued to grow, reaching a crescendo that filled the room with energy and emotion. Every note seemed to vibrate with her heartbeats, every chord a reflection of her struggles and victories. The restaurant itself seemed to come alive, its walls echoing with the resonance of her story. Guests who had been skeptical or indifferent moments before were now leaning forward, completely absorbed, realizing that they were witnessing something rare and profound. A woman near the piano, herself a pianist, could not contain her admiration. She whispered to her companion, voice trembling with awe, "She's incredible. She has a soul in her music that I've never heard before." Her companion nodded, equally amazed, understanding that this was not just skill, but something deeper, a connection, a life lived and expressed through sound. The girl, oblivious to the whispers, focused entirely on her performance, letting the music carry her and everyone in the room along its path. By the time she finished, the room was silent for a moment, as if everyone collectively held their breath. Then, slowly, applause erupted, growing in intensity and filling the space with admiration and respect. People rose to their feet, clapping, cheering softly, some wiping tears from their eyes. Even the staff, who had initially been hesitant and skeptical, joined in. Their expressions transformed from doubt to reverence. The manager approached her after the performance, his face a mixture of awe and apology. "I was wrong to judge you before," he said quietly. "You are extraordinary. I see that now." The girl nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. Words could not fully express what she felt. She had found recognition not just through applause, but through understanding and respect. It was a rare gift, one she cherished deeply. The producer stepped forward, extending his hand with encouragement. "There's a world out there that needs to hear your music," he said gently. "I want to help you share it. If you are willing, I can guide you, and we can make sure your talent reaches the people who will truly appreciate it." The girl looked at him, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and nervousness. She had always dreamed of a future beyond the streets. But now the possibility seemed real, tangible, and within reach. For the rest of the day, people came by the restaurant, asking about her, praising her, and sharing stories of how they had been moved by her performance. She realized that her music was no longer just for herself. It was touching lives, inspiring others, and creating ripples beyond her own experience. Every note she played carried the weight of her journey, and now it was lifting others as well. That evening, as she walked back through the streets she had known so long, she felt a sense of transformation. The city, still loud and bustling, seemed less hostile, more alive, more full of possibilities. She thought about the piano, the applause, the smiles, the tears, and the words of encouragement. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that life could be different, that she could belong somewhere, and that her music could open doors she had never imagined. The night settled in, cool and quiet. She found her usual corner to sleep, but this time her thoughts were filled with music and hope, not just survival. She reflected on the events of the day, the faces she had seen, and the emotions she had shared. Music had not only given her a voice, but it had also started to create a path forward, a way to connect with the world, and perhaps even to change her life entirely. And as she drifted into a deep sleep, her dreams were filled with melodies, applause, and the promise of what might come next. The days that followed were different for the girl. The city was the same, busy, loud, and indifferent in many ways, but she felt a shift within herself. She walked through the streets with her small bag over her shoulder, but now she held her head a little higher. Her fingers itched to play, and the memory of the piano and the recognition she had received fueled a new sense of purpose. She was still living on the streets, still hungry at times, still facing the cold nights, but something had changed. She had a voice that people wanted to hear, a gift that could not be ignored. One morning, she was approached by the producer who had noticed her earlier. Her heart raced as she looked at him, unsure what to expect. He smiled kindly, offering reassurance. "I've arranged for someone important to meet you today," he said. "They want to hear your music and see what you can do." This could be the first step toward something bigger. Her mind swirled with questions, doubts, and excitement. She had never experienced anything like this before. Every opportunity she had ever imagined seemed to come with conditions, but this was different. This was genuine interest, not pity. They walked together to a small music studio nearby. The building was quiet, filled with instruments and the faint scent of wood and polish. She had never been in a place like this before. Everything seemed precise, polished, and intimidating. But when she saw the piano in the center of the room, her heart leapt. It was familiar, a friend, a companion that had been part of her journey. She sat down cautiously, taking a moment to let her hands hover over the keys. A man, a professional musician with experience and influence, watched from a distance. He had heard the recordings the producer had shared and had agreed to meet the girl in person. He was curious, not just about her skill, but about the story behind her music. He wanted to understand what made her play the way she did. When she began, it was as if the piano came alive beneath her fingers. The music flowed effortlessly, filling the studio with a depth of feeling that was impossible to ignore. Her fingers danced across the keys with confidence and emotion. Each note told a story of struggle and hope, of hunger and survival, of resilience in the face of despair. The man watched closely, his eyes wide in admiration. He had seen talented musicians before, but there was something rare in her playing, a raw honesty, a connection between her life experiences and the music she created. It was not just skill. It was soul. As she continued, the producer whispered softly to her, "Play from your heart. Don't think about them, just let the music speak." She nodded, letting the words guide her. The music grew stronger, more expressive, each chord resonating with the emotions she had carried for so long. It was a performance not meant for applause, but for understanding, and the room seemed to listen with rapt attention. After she finished, there was a moment of silence. The professional musician stood quietly, processing what he had just heard. Then he spoke, his voice steady but filled with awe. "I've never heard anything like that before. Your talent is extraordinary, and it deserves to be shared with the world. You have a story that people need to hear, not just the music, but the life behind it." The girl felt a mixture of fear and excitement. This was real. Someone was taking her seriously, not judging her by her appearance, not dismissing her as invisible. They were seeing her as she truly was. The producer continued, explaining a plan. He had contacts in the music industry, people who could provide training, exposure, and opportunities for performances. He spoke about concerts, small venues at first, and eventually larger stages where her music could reach many people. The girl listened, barely able to believe what she was hearing. She had never imagined that her life could change so quickly, that the music that had been her secret refuge could become her path to a new future. Over the next few days, she began to visit the studio regularly. Each session was a mixture of learning, exploration, and discovery. The professional musician guided her, showing her techniques, helping her refine her playing, and encouraging her to express more of herself in the music. The girl absorbed everything eagerly, her fingers moving with growing confidence, her heart open to the possibilities around her. She discovered new ways to tell her story through sound, to convey her emotions more clearly, and to touch the hearts of listeners. As her skill grew, so did her confidence. She began to imagine performing in front of larger audiences, sharing her music beyond the studio and the restaurant. The thought was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. She had spent so long feeling invisible, ignored, and alone. Now, people were paying attention, listening, and valuing what she had to offer. It was a strange, new feeling, and she cherished it with every fiber of her being. One afternoon, the producer arranged a small gathering at the studio for a few local musicians and enthusiasts. He wanted her to play in front of an audience for the first time outside the restaurant. The girl was nervous, but she understood that this was a step she had to take. She had learned to play for herself, but now it was time to play for others in a formal setting, to share her story and her talent on a larger scale. When she arrived, the room was filled with people chatting and setting up instruments. Some glanced at her curiously, others with anticipation. She approached the piano, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. She had played in front of strangers before, but this was different. These people were here specifically to hear her, to evaluate her, and perhaps even to help shape her path forward. She took a deep breath, sat down, and placed her hands on the keys. The music began softly, slowly, building as she poured her emotions into each note. Her life, her struggles, her hopes, and her dreams were woven into the melody. The audience fell silent, captivated by the raw honesty and beauty of her playing. She played with a freedom she had never known before, letting the music guide her, letting it speak for her. She was no longer invisible. She was a storyteller, an artist, a force that could touch hearts and inspire others. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. some with tears in their eyes. The professional musician approached her, smiling warmly. "You have something truly special," he said. "This is only the beginning. You are going to inspire many people, and your music will reach far beyond these walls." The girl felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and disbelief. She had never imagined this life, never dared to hope for it, and yet here it was, unfolding before her in the weeks that followed. She continued her lessons, performances, and practice. Her reputation grew, and more people began to take notice. Invitations came for small performances, radio interviews, and even a few local news stories. Everywhere she went, people were amazed by her talent and her story. She had become a symbol of hope and resilience, someone who had turned her struggles into something beautiful that could inspire and uplift others. Through it all, she remained humble, remembering the streets she had walked, the hunger she had felt, and the nights of loneliness. She understood that her journey had not ended, that there would still be challenges and obstacles. But she also understood that she had discovered a path forward, one built on talent, courage, and the power of music. She had found a voice that could reach the world, and she intended to use it. As she walked home one evening, the city alive with lights and movement, she felt a quiet joy. The piano, the studio, the performances, and the people who believed in her had opened doors she had never dreamed of. She had gone from being invisible, ignored by the world, to someone whose presence, music, and story mattered. She had discovered that life could change in ways she had never imagined, and she embraced the possibilities with an open heart and a brave spirit. That night, as she lay down to rest, she thought about the journey she had taken from the streets, the hunger and the cold, to the piano, the music, and the people who believed in her. She realized that the music had not only changed her life, but it had also changed her, giving her confidence, hope, and a sense of purpose. And as sleep carried her away, her dreams were filled with melodies, applause, and the promise of a future she had never dared to imagine before. The morning light spilled into the small apartment that had been arranged for her by the producer. It was modest, simple, but it was hers, a space where she could rest, practice, and feel safe. For the first time, she did not have to worry about where she would sleep, what she would eat, or how she would survive the night. Her past life on the streets felt distant now, though the memories remained vivid, a reminder of how far she had come and what she had endured to reach this moment. She woke early, as was her habit, and made her way to the studio. The piano waited. For her, gleaming under the soft morning light that filtered through the windows. She ran her fingers over the keys, remembering the first time she had touched them in that restaurant. Back then, her music had been raw and unpolished, driven by instinct and emotion. Today, it was different. It was refined, expressive, and powerful, yet it still carried the soul and honesty that had always been her signature. She smiled, feeling a surge of excitement for the day ahead. The producer greeted her warmly, holding a folder filled with plans for upcoming performances and media opportunities. "Today is important," he said. "We have an audience that can change everything for you. They want to hear your story, see your music, and understand who you are." Her stomach fluttered with nerves, but she took a deep breath. She had come a long way, learned to trust herself and to believe in her music. She was ready. The venue was small but prestigious, a space where musicians were known to launch their careers. The girl entered, her heart pounding, and was met with a room full of curious eyes. There were critics, music producers, journalists, and enthusiasts. Some had heard of her story, some had seen the videos circulating online, and others knew nothing. She was both anxious and exhilarated. Her life had been full of uncertainty, but this was a step toward a future she had only dreamed of. She approached the piano, sitting carefully as she adjusted her posture. The room fell silent as she lifted her hands above the keys. Then she began to play. The first notes were gentle, soft, drawing the audience in. She closed her eyes, letting her emotions guide her fingers. The music flowed naturally, each chord and melody expressing her journey. The hunger, the cold nights, the struggles, the moments of despair, and the sparks of hope that had carried her through. Every note told a story that words could not capture. The audience was captivated. People who had once been skeptical leaned forward, listening intently. Critics, often hard to impress, were moved. The professional musicians in the room nodded, in respect, recognizing not just her skill, but the depth of emotion and authenticity she conveyed. Her music filled the space, a bridge between her past and her present, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit. As she played, memories of her time on the streets flooded her mind. The cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness, the people who had ignored her, the small kindnesses that had kept her going, all were present in her music. But alongside them were new memories, the support she had received, the encouragement from the producer, the lessons, and the small victories she had achieved. The music became a dialogue between her past and her future, a conversation that resonated with everyone listening. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. People stood, cheering, some with tears in their eyes. The critics exchanged impressed glances, realizing that they had witnessed something extraordinary. The girl looked around, feeling the warmth and validation she had never experienced before. For the first time, she was recognized not for her appearance, not for her hardships, but for her talent, her courage, and the story she had lived and shared through music. After the performance, she was approached by several influential figures in the music industry. They wanted to collaborate, to offer opportunities for recordings, concerts, and media coverage. They spoke with excitement and sincerity, eager to help her reach a wider audience. She listened, overwhelmed but inspired. She realized that her music, once a private refuge, had become a beacon, capable of inspiring and touching countless lives. In the following weeks, her schedule filled quickly. She moved from studio sessions to interviews, from small performances to larger venues. Everywhere she went, people were captivated by her story and her talent. They were drawn to the authenticity of her music, the emotion that flowed effortlessly from her hands. She became not just a musician, but a symbol of hope, resilience, and the power of never giving up. Despite the growing attention and opportunities, she remained grounded. She remembered the streets, the hunger, and the nights of uncertainty. She remembered the kindness of strangers and the small moments of hope that had carried her through. These memories fueled her determination to remain humble and focused, to use her talent not just for personal gain, but to inspire and uplift others. Her music was her gift, and she wanted to share it with the world in the most meaningful way possible. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she stepped outside into the quiet night. The city lights glimmered around her, reflecting off the wet pavement from a recent rain. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. For the first time, she felt a profound sense of peace and possibility. The struggles of her past remained, but they no longer defined her. She had transformed her life through courage, talent, and determination. She thought about the people who had doubted her, ignored her, or judged her by appearances. She did not feel anger or resentment, only gratitude that she had persisted, that she had trusted herself and her music. She knew that her journey could inspire others who were struggling, who felt invisible, or who faced impossible odds. Her life had become proof that perseverance, talent, and hope could create extraordinary change. As she prepared for her next performance, she felt a mixture of excitement and calm. She had grown from the girl who had wandered the streets hungry and overlooked to a musician whose music commanded attention and admiration. Each note she played carried her story, her emotions, and her resilience. She knew that her journey was far from over, that challenges would continue to arise, but she also knew that she had the strength and the skill to face them. Her life had been transformed not by luck alone, but by her talent, her courage, and the people who had seen her for who she truly was. She had learned to trust herself, to embrace her abilities, and to believe in the power of her music. The journey from the streets to the stage had been difficult, filled with uncertainty and fear, but it had also been filled with discovery, growth, and triumph. That night, as she played one of her compositions in a packed venue, the audience was spellbound. Each note spoke to the struggles and hopes that were universal, yet deeply personal. She felt a connection with everyone in the room, a shared understanding that transcended words. The applause at the end was thunderous, yet she focused not on the sound, but on the joy and fulfillment that playing had always brought her. As she left the stage, she looked out at the crowd, their faces lit with admiration and emotion. She realized that her journey had not only changed her life, but it had touched countless others. She had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, talent, courage, and perseverance could create miracles. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the music, the people who had believed in her, and the life she had built from the fragments of her past. That night, she returned to her apartment, feeling a calm satisfaction that she had never known. She lay down to sleep, her heart full of music and hope. She thought about her journey from the cold streets, the hunger, the isolation, to the piano, the performances, and the recognition that had changed her life. She realized that she had not only survived, but she had thrived, creating beauty and inspiration from the hardships she had endured. As sleep carried her away, her dreams were filled with melodies, applause, and endless possibilities. She knew that her journey would continue, that music would always be her voice, and that the world would always have a place for her talent. And for the first time in her life, she felt completely seen, heard, and valued. Her music had changed her life, and now she could use it to touch the lives of others, inspiring hope, courage, and the belief that no matter the circumstances, a spark of talent and determination could transform the world.